What's going on, guys, and welcome to another Doctor Who review. Today we're going to be reviewing Series 11 Episode 3, Rosa. Now, people were really interested to see how this episode would turn out. It's basically completely about racism, and it's actually one of the only pure historical stories we've ever had in New Who. I say the closest episode to come to this in New Who would be probably Vincent and the Doctor, and even that I think had more of an alien presence than this one. I mean, this story didn't really have an alien presence at all. I mean, it didn't have an alien presence at all. It had a villain, but not really an alien presence, and even the villain was very, very minor. So yeah, this was something that we saw quite a lot in Classic Who, but it was completely different for New Who, so it did feel very, very strange, at least for me. And especially for me, because the pure historicals in Classic Who, I haven't really seen any of them yet. So yeah, this was definitely a different episode. But anyway, let's get into it, starting off with the cast. So we'll of course start with Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor. She was really, really good here. I said in episode 1 that, she was the Doctor. From the get-go, I totally believed her in the role. She was really, really good. However, she didn't quite hit that high mark yet. I said that about the Ghost Monument as well. However, in this episode, I think, on the whole, she was just kind of the same as she has been, but there was one moment in particular that I think really stood out, and that's when she was kind of having a confrontation with Krasko, the villain of this story. I say villain of this story. That moment where, she destroys the Vortex Manipulator. By the way, how cool is that we get a mention of the Vortex Manipulator? Captain Jack. So cool. I mean, this guy even kind of looks a bit like Captain Jack, with the leather coat, like he looked in Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways. Really, really cool. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I imagine it probably was, but that's really awesome. But anyway, that whole scene with her, with the Doctor and Krasko was amazing. Her acting was phenomenal. The best she's acted all series, and the best it's been written all series. Her other stuff I thought was once again pretty good, but I think more than anything it's not necessarily her acting that not really lets her down, but just doesn't really hit the mark for me. It's how it's written. I think Chris Chibnall writes things very strangely, especially with the humour. I don't think he really gets the humour too right. There are a couple of pretty funny moments in this one that actually made me kind of giggle a little bit. I mean, kind of snicker a bit, But yeah, on the whole, Jodie Whittaker was really, really good in this story. I think she was pretty on par with herself on the first two episodes. However, this episode I think she did slightly go up a little bit. Bradley Walsh as Graham, once again really, really good. I've said this before and I'll say it again, I love Graham. I think he's really, really good. He didn't have too much amazingness in this story, apart from at the end where Rosa Parks Rosa Parks is on the bus, and Graham's about to get off the bus, like saying, this is where we got to get off and go, but the Doctor's like, no, there's not enough people on the bus, we need to stay here, or if we leave, then there's going to be enough spaces. She's not going to stand up for herself, and history's going to change. So they have to stay on the bus. And the look on Bradley Walsh's face, on Graham's face, when she's getting arrested and she's saying no, the cops are coming, and the look on his face is just traumatic. He's so devastated, and I absolutely love it. That's a brilliant bit of acting by Bradley Walsh there. Definitely a standout moment for him. Tosin Cole as Ryan Sinclair. I thought Ryan was pretty good in this one as well. I really felt bad for him in this one because he was the main black character. I mean, we've got two dark characters. We've got Ryan, and then we've got Yasmin as well, who is darker skinned, not really black but darker skinned. But yeah, Ryan really got a lot of shit in this episode, and I felt really bad for him. I mean, people called him the N-word. I can't believe they actually went out. I mean, they didn't use like the really, really racist N-word. However, I'm not going to say it, but they used a pretty bad word, which for a PG show, I was surprised they used. So yeah, I mean, that was just, they were really pushing the boundaries in this episode. I'll get onto that in a minute though. But yeah, Ryan, I think on the whole was pretty good in this one. He still doesn't blow me away as an actor. I mean, he's good, but he just doesn't blow me away. He's good. He's definitely good. Just doesn't blow me away. But in this story, I was really feeling for him because he was kind of getting destroyed and felt really bad for him. And then as for Yasmin, well, actually she had a bit more to do in this story, and I was glad about that. I still don't think she's anywhere near as developed as Ryan or Graham, but in this story she did have a bit more. She talked about her family a bit more. You know, she had all the stuff with talking about, you know, what happens at home with all the racism and stuff, because, you know, they still do get it these days. And, you know, they had a bunch of good moments. She had some good conversations with Rosa, with the doctor. So Yasmin is an improvement for this episode, definitely. She's still nowhere near as developed as I think she should be, but I think we will get that in the next episode, because Arachnid's in the UK, which is episode 4. We're getting introduced to her parents, and I'm guessing that next episode is going to be very Yasmin focused, so I'm looking forward to that. I'm just glad that we did get a little bit more from her in this episode. Also, let's just talk about Vinette Robinson as Rosa Parks. I wasn't really... I will be honest, I didn't really know who Rosa Parks was. I know who Martin Luther King is, but yeah, Rosa Parks, not really. I'm not a very historical person. I don't know my history very well. I'm not really that interested in history, to be honest, apart from maybe specific things, and, you know, the things that everybody knows, like Hitler and, you know, Lincoln and stuff like that. But I mean, Rosa Parks wasn't something that I was really familiar with, so I don't really know what she was like at all. I think as a character in a TV show, Vinette was good in the role. I can't really say anything else than that because I didn't really know anything about the character. But yeah, there's nothing really I have to complain about there. So onto the story itself. Now, this is a really different thing for Doctor Who, especially for new series Doctor Who, for modern Who. There isn't an alien threat in this story at all. There is a villain, which is Krasko. He's basically, I don't think he's a time agent, but he's got a vortex manipulator. He's got some pretty high-tech weapons, and he looks like he's in kind of a boy band motorcycle gang. And yeah, he's okay. I didn't really understand his motives, to be honest. I don't think, you know, this character was very unfleshed out. He wasn't fleshed out at all. Now, I've looked at a couple of reviews and kind of looked at people's thoughts on this episode so far. By the way, people seem to regard this episode very, very highly. I'll get onto that later, but they regard it pretty damn highly. But everybody says that the villain doesn't need to be, in this story, the villain doesn't need to be that fleshed out. And I can understand that in a way. I can definitely understand that in a way. However, me personally, I like an episode with a good villain. And usually an alien villain is preferable. We don't get any aliens in this at all, and barely even a villain. But that doesn't really bother me that much. However, the motives, for me, what motives did this guy have? He wanted the world to be back to what it used to be like. He didn't like that Rosa Parks pretty much started the civil rights movement and, you know, made black people a more normal part of society, which is an amazing thing, of course, but he didn't agree with that. Even though he was from the far, far future, from what I imagine, he didn't agree with that. But I don't understand his motives. I just don't. It didn't really come across. It was just like, oh yeah, I don't like that this is where the world's gone, so I want to make it back to how it should have been. I didn't really get his motives. I just didn't really understand it. I mean, there are people out there, even nowadays, that are still racist. Even with this world that we live in now, there are people out there that are still very, very racist. But I just didn't really get his motives. I'm gonna be honest. I didn't understand it. I felt like they had to have a villain in there somewhere, so they just chucked this guy in there. I don't know, he was alright, but his motives were just not there for me, and he was very undeveloped. Now, as for the story itself, you know, it was all about Rosa Parks. You know, she got on this bus. The bus was full. When white people come aboard, because she's coloured, they are, you know, the coloured people are supposed to get up, let the white people have the seats, and she doesn't do that, and ends up getting arrested because of it. But then that ends up starting, you know, this whole thing, and she ends up starting the civil rights movement and makes the world a better place. And this whole story is really about a guy who just wants to stop this because he wants the world to be in the way where, you know, white people rule the world. And I'm going to be honest, that is not really much of the focus. It's really a focus on Rosa Parks, and we just want to, it's a pure historical episode, really. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of pure historical episodes, from what I can tell. Now, Vincent and the Doctor, which, like I said, is probably the closest thing we've got in New Who, to this. I actually really like that story, but that does something a bit different. The emotion in that is crazy good, and even the villain, although it's not very good, not very developed at all, it at least is quite interesting, whereas the villain in this one just really falls flat for me. So yeah, I mean, let me just say that the racism in this, I'm very surprised that Chris Chibnall decided that he wanted to push things this far. This is pretty brutal stuff for Doctor Who, so I'm gonna give him a point for that. You know what? You bloody did that. And although it was quite disturbing, the things that they were saying, you know what, that's what it was going for, and you pulled it off, mate. You really did pull it off. So that's really good. Also, he wasn't the only writer. Malone, what's her name? Mallory Blackman was actually the main writer for this episode, so very good on her as well. But I suppose Chris Chibnall would have approved it. So yeah, that's all really good. And altogether, just the emotion and everything in this is very good. The only problem is, there's barely any action. I like a lot of action in my Doctor Who stories. That's just me personally. When you're a big fan of New Who especially, and you've kind of started off with New Who and gone through all of New Who, action's something that you kind of just get used to. So having a story like this, it just doesn't really do it for me in a lot of ways. However, I'm going to be honest. I mean, what this was going for with the emotion and the racism and all that, it absolutely nailed it. I just don't think this story was for me. Now, I'm not going to say this story's bad though, because it wasn't. I just don't think it was for me. People are giving this story 9s and 10s out of 10. For some people, yes, sure, that's probably what it deserves. For me though, that's not what it's going to deserve, and not what it deserves. For me, that's not the score I'm going to give it, but we'll get onto that in a second. The only other thing I want to say is the music, on the whole, was good, apart from the end. When Rosa Parks gets arrested and taken off the bus, what do we play? What is it, Adele? I think Adele starts playing, or it sounds like Adele. It's just some, like, you know, pop music. What? That just didn't, and I just didn't. It ruined it. I think they should have just had some nice instrumental, just nice sad music. But instead we get this silly pop music that doesn't work with Doctor Who, and then, even worse than that, it goes into the credits as well. We have that music in the credits too. I was wanting to hear the Doctor Who theme again, but instead we get this bloody pop music in the credits. Yeah, not a big fan of that. But anyway, I've actually rambled quite a lot in this one. What am I going to give this story? You know, it's not my sort of story. It really isn't. But I can really appreciate what they've done. I can really appreciate what they've done with the story. So because of that, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's average. I think it is the average story. Like, of the 3 stories so far, I think it sits in the middle. I think if you like this sort of thing, then you would absolutely love it. If you really don't like this sort of thing, you probably really don't like it. If you're just like me and is not really too bothered, you kind of just sit in the middle. I can appreciate what they were going for, but it's just not my cup of tea. So yeah, 7 out of 10. But anyway, that's going to be it for this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead, like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.